Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, February 3rd, Human Services Committee. My name is Alden Braithwaite, and we have a quorum. Is there a motion to approve the regular minute meetings from our December 9th, 2019 meeting? It's been properly moved and seconded. Any questions, comments, or edits? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we have HSM1. Staff's we already did the minutes. Public comments. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 speakers. You'll each have 3 minutes apiece, starting with State Representative Robin Gable, if she's available.
Where's the timer? Oh, we don't have one. Oh, it's city
You're
council.
good. 3 minutes.
I don't need that long. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really would like to thank the committee for hearing our testimony today. Appreciate it. So as a state representative, the well-being of Illinois residents, and especially of those who live in my hometown, Evanston, is vitally important to me. As our residents age, end-of-life choices become increasingly important. Choices such as those embodied in advance directives and physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment or POLST have long been recognized as lawful and appropriate by our state. But Illinois has yet to enact a medical aid in dying law like that of many other states. I believe that medical aid in dying should be one of the options available to adults who are terminally ill and mentally capable of making healthcare decisions. To this end, I have been working with the Illinois End-of-Life Options Coalition to craft a bill like the one that has been the law of Oregon for more than 20 years. I am also part of Compassion and Choices Evanston Action Team, which has been working for a couple of years now to educate Evanston residents about what this option means. In addition to making presentations and leading discussions about end-of-life options at places of worship, senior centers, and senior residences in Evanston, volunteers from the Action Team have spoken at the City of Evanston's Equity and Empowerment Committee, and I believe also at this committee. A question that has been raised about is why a local resolution is necessary, given that Evanston's General Assembly members, Jen Gong Gershowitz, Laura Fine, and myself already support a medical aid in dying law. Here's the answer. Evanston's voice is important. When I stand up in Springfield to urge the passage of a medical aid in dying law, my voice will be far stronger if I can point out that my hometown supports me, as demonstrated by its passage of a local resolution. Similar resolutions were key to the passage of a similar law in California and to the progress of the legislation in other states where bills are pending. This is why I hope the Evanston City Council will pass a local resolution urging the Illinois General Assembly to make our state the next to make this humane, compassionate option available to its terminally ill, mentally capable adult residents. Illinois deserves to have medical aid in dying available among the other lawful end-of-life options. As you know, if we pass this here, there can be other municipalities that will look to us and will pass the same types of resolutions. Sometimes things start from the bottom up, and this is one of the times when we think this is a good way to go. So I appreciate your listening to my comments, and feel free to ask me questions here or any other time as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker up, Mr. Ruff. Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you. That's all?
That's all.
No,
Yes.
just joking. Alderman Braithwaite, Health Director Ike, and members of the Human Services. Thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. I am not as well known as our previous speaker, so I will introduce myself. My name is Oliver A. Ruff. I'm a resident of the 8th Ward. I'm a longtime resident of Evanston, a retired principal, administrator, and teacher of several schools in Evanston and suburbs. I'm here to support Resolution 14R20, which would send a strong message to the state legislature to authorize the medical aid in dying. I have been reaching out to the underserved community in Evanston, and it is clear to me that they are not being adequately informed about their range of end-of-life options that are available and not always aware of how to ensure that the final wishes will be honored. Medical aid in dying provides options for those who are with terminal illnesses, whose suffering is unbearable, where palliative care is not always enough. I realize that there are people who may not opt for this practice because of religious beliefs or other reasons, and that's okay. This is meant to be an option for those who feel that this is appropriate for them. I devote time, energy, and effort to as a part of the Evanston Action Team because I believe that we need to ensure equity for any individual at the end of life, particularly for Black and people of color in the community. I ask you to approve the full City Council consideration of 14R20 and ultimately pass the resolution. Thank you for your time and attention for this important matter of life or death. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Larry Blondie.
Right here.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Larry Biondi. I'm an Evanston resident in the 5th Ward.
Can you hear him?
Yes, thank you, sir.
I work at Progress Center for Independent Living in Forest Park. I'm also a member of Not Dead Yet, an organization that opposes doctor-assisted suicide. I'm here tonight to oppose Evanston's proposed suicide ordinance. Studies that legalizes assisted suicide pose significant dangers to people with disabilities. On October 9th, 2019, the National Council on Disability released the findings of a federal examination, the county's suicide laws, and the effect on people with disabilities, finding the law's safeguards are ineffective and oversight of abuse and mistakes is absent. Over the last 2 decades, every national disability organization that has taken a position assisted suicide opposes it. The reasons for opposing laws are many. 1. When doctor-assisted suicide is legal, it's the cheapest treatment available, an attractive option in our profit-driven healthcare system. Second, terminal diagnoses and prognoses are too often wrong. People to lose good years of their lives. Third, if one doctor says no, people can doctor shop for another doctor who will say yes. 4. People with the disability of depression are subject to harm where assisted suicide is legal. The highly touted safeguards turned out to be very hollow with no real enforcement or investigation authority. Furthermore, doctor-assisted suicide prescription for abuse for a caretaker, they can steer them toward doctor-assisted suicide. Many other pressures exist that can cause people with compromised health to hasten their death. Evidence appears to show that assisted suicide laws lead to suicide contagion, driving up the general suicide rate. We already have the right to good pain relief, including palliative sedation. repeated, so these laws are unnecessary. In closing, because the dangers of mistakes, coercion, and abuse are significant. Many medical organizations also oppose doctor-assisted suicide laws, including the American Medical Association and the American College of Physicians. And many state legislators in this country have repeatedly rejected them. And I hope that the Illinois General Assembly will follow the same suit. The U.S. Supreme Court and the highest state court rulings to date have declined to find a constitutional right to doctor-assisted suicide. I urge you to vote no to this very dangerous proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got
Thank you. Next, we have Ann Gunter.
Larry was saying he has written copy for anyone who wants to.
Yes, you can submit it, and we'll,
Thank you.
Ms. Gunter? Okay, take your time.
Hello, my name is Ann Gunter, and I'm very honored to be here tonight to express my opinion and those of many other people with disabilities throughout the suburbs about what's going on in terms of assisted suicide or voluntary euthanasia, or in some cases, it might actually be the medical assistance in dying. Right, the medical aid. I am a person with disabilities. I was in hospice for about 3 months this past year, and I had to fight my way out of hospice to get back into the real world. So I want to make sure that people know that it is, that medical options aren't in and of themselves a way to achieve what is hoped by this, the image of this current assisted suicide phase throughout the country. Assisted suicide only works if you actually want to die and can't do it yourself. But if you can't do it yourself, how are you sure that you're communicating what you want to someone else? That's the big problem. If you look up the types of assistance that can happen in terms of getting people help, there are 5 different types. There's the type of voluntary assistance where a competent person makes voluntary and enduring requests to be helped. I can tell you that it takes a lot of help to get even across that enduring request to stay well. How can someone who's sick fight off an opinion of someone else, a doctor who tells you that you're dying, and then you have to find out the veracity, and then you have to get past the depression, pass through the anger, and still come out on the other side and deal with it? If we don't have this community services, the psych support that are intact to help people with the positive side of I want to live, the positive side of I can deal with my problems and still have a valuable life and contribute to society, then we aren't going to be achieving anything but eliminating people, because people are all you're going to get rid of. You're not getting rid of the problem. So what I'd like to say today is that it's a slippery slope between going from voluntary assistance where you're asking for assistance to having somebody into your life by not taking necessary actions to support your life, to people who are voluntarily assisting you to take the drugs, and then putting my life down because I don't have understanding that what's going to be happening to me is going to kill me, and downright to absolute murder where you're doing something against my will. How do we measure this? How do we as a society address that slippery slope? Who's going to enforce the fact that might be somebody out there who doesn't understand and who's willing to help me kill myself, but is not willing to help me get the psychiatric help, the physical help, the home services help that I need in order to live a good life? It's not necessarily the diagnosis of terminal illness that gets you. It may be the very help that you're asking for that will trap you into something that you aren't wanting to have. Assisted suicide can be immoral. It can be very bad if you are asking for help. Should the person who is offering to give you your help, how are they trained to deal with your issues? Are they a trained psychiatrist who know that you're depressed? Are they able to evaluate your psychiatric and your intellectual ability to make determinations? All these things that are talked about as givens of an enduring request. Was it one night? Was it a month's nights of saying you want to die? Who determines those? And the system is not in place that can do all those things at once. And I hesitate to say that we can't do it right now. I'd love to have everybody have a choice to be independent throughout their entire life and choose when to end it. But if we have that and it works, it's great. But if it doesn't work, it's horrific and it's deadly and immoral. And I want people to think twice about that before they pass it, when indeed we already have systems in place for legal documentation. We have all these other things that are there because it's still illegal to kill someone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have three other speakers. John Lyon Berger. Thank you, sir.
Kleptomania.
3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I am John Lionberger. I am the minister chaplain at Three Crowns Park Retirement Community here in Evanston. And I want to say at the outset that medical aid in dying is only for the terminally ill and nobody else, and that's strictly regulated. In the 20 years of its existence, starting in Oregon, there has never been any substantiated case of an abuse of that imperative. None. Zero. So I got interested in this when my father died screaming in agony because the morphine wasn't working anymore, and he died a death that nobody wants. I begged the staff as his son to just help him end it, and of course they couldn't and wouldn't do it, and I understand. But nonetheless, it was pretty horrible. So at Three Crowns, we have regular 6-month monthly meetings to talk about death and dying because it is a retirement community and these people are, in their senior years. And they're always well attended, and we always have discussions after each session. At the beginning, we talk about what their fears of death and dying are, and always it is not the act of dying, it is the dying a painful death. Death doesn't scare them, but dying a painful death does. Nearly all of them, not all, but nearly all of them, want this kind of option to allow them the autonomy to make their own decisions about their own lives. I do a lot of one-on-one counseling, as you can imagine, both the families and the residents. And I never bring this up because it's not an option that the state can offer them at this point. But if they bring it up, we talk about it, and almost universally, they would like this option to have the autonomy of deciding their own lives. Every religion I know of places compassion right at the top of how people are meant to treat each other. I see medical aid in dying as a logical and natural and necessary addition to the resources that are already in place to help people do that. Things like PULST, DNR, and the 5 wishes, those are the ones I'm most familiar with. And the intention of all of these directives is to allow the person as much autonomy as possible. The key concept to remember that if it is passed, it is an option. It is not a mandate.
I need to wrap it up.
Am I out of time?
Or just wrap it up.
Okay.
I'm trying
All
to
right.
be respectful
Yeah,
for
I
the
appreciate that.
conversation.
In a nationwide survey, 70% of the people surveyed said they wanted to die at home. 70% of the people do not die at home. They die in hospitals or nursing facilities. What we found is that in Oregon and Washington, nearly 90% of the people who are in this program die at home fulfilling their wish. So that's just another component of this. So I obviously do encourage you to give this very serious thought and pass it along to the full council. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jill Gardner.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm a resident of the 4th Ward of Evanston. And, you know, it's hard to listen to Ms. Gunther, that's you, right? Without feeling something in your heart, without feeling compassion. And I actually support what you said about how people need to be supported in their desire and fight to live. This isn't, I don't think about that. I also support the idea that people need protection against misuse. The last thing I want to say about what was previously said is that this is not suicide, it's not assisted suicide. People who commit suicide have made a decision to end their lives. The people we're talking about, and this replies to, their lives are ending. They have no choice about that. They are terminally ill and they are going to die. What we are talking about is how they die. One of the things that, I'm a clinical psychologist, and one of the things I know from my work as a psychologist is that one of the things that we hate and fear the most is a loss of autonomy. And when people are terminally ill at the end of their lives, eventually they are confronted with a profound loss of autonomy in nearly every aspect of their lives. And this can create intense and overwhelming anxiety. So knowing that one has the power to hasten an inevitable end can reduce, we just heard about the physical anguish. I'm talking about reducing the emotional anguish and providing peace of mind in the face of fear and impending total loss of everything, loss of life. So terminally ill people cannot forestall their death, but they can potentially forestall the anxiety and terror of utter powerlessness that their dying evokes. So I hope that you'll support the resolution to give those who would want it this desperately needed relief and peace of mind during their very last final days on earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. Our last speaker is Doreen Price, but I don't see her. Oh, I'm sorry. And you'll be our last speaker.
Thank you. This has to do with, I was excited, but it was only, oh, he knows the procedure better than I do. Sit, please. Sit. Sit. Thank you. So anyway, I was really excited because I thought about things in a different way because of all the meetings I go to. And also I was inspired by Cicely Fleming because she talked about program-directed funding. And we all know, and I've also mentioned and fought alongside everyone else in terms of like, how do you make sense of this and prioritize what's the need when the need is so great, or even in my own case, of needing help and not wanting to take away from someone else. So having a system that makes that happen, where people feel better about what they get, that they're not taking away from someone else, and that they're a benefit of society and they're not a burden, is kind of, I think, key to Ike's program, I'm hoping, as he explains more of it, and knowing him, at least at levels where he was trying to help me and couldn't. So I'm reading what I wrote. So as we found through the Affordable Housing Fund and the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, establishing program-directed funding is important. And Cicely Fleming has advocated program-directed funding in competing priorities for well-established needs and solutions sensitive to social justice. In HS1, departments, and you say only departments, but you list committees, can be designated and forms created for specialized program donations. For example, the arts donation form will go to the Public Arts Subcommittee, and then it will go to the Arts Council. Again, you have the header of department, so clarify that. And then I go, isn't this an amazing time and opportunity to include the purpose for homelessness prevention with oversight by Homelessness and Housing Committee of donations to Health and Human Services Homelessness Prevention Fund, which I'm sure was a quagmire before. This would clarify things and make things simpler for everyone. And also more equitable in terms of without question being done by a group that is trusted to make recommendations to the Affordable Housing Steering Committee. So the Homelessness Prevention Fund application forms can go to Homelessness and Housing Committee to devise criteria and process, perhaps via a subcommittee with the Equity and Empowerment Commission to include social justice. That seems to be a really, really great partnership. I know it's being done now with the Environmental Board. Improving the application process and this essential health and human service function would grow, or the department would grow home ownership benefits and community and preserve community. So that's it. Thank you. I'll submit this and hopefully clarify the last sentence.
That's fine.
Oh, and then
All right.
one more. If not now, can the donation policy add provision to allow and identify future donation funding programs as committees, commissions, and city council recommends? So I'm saying if you can't do it right now because you're in a hurry, then please add the provision that you can add committees, and which committees can add, you can decide as a city council. So hope that was okay.
Thank you. All right. So we're now moving to items for consideration. Item HS1, Resolution 3-R-20, approval of the City Council donation policy. Do you have a report on that?
All right. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee, Shanika Hohenkirk, ICMA Management Fellow. So today I'm just giving you a brief update on the donation policy. We started this back in, I want to say early summer, but of course we had to talk to the different departments, make sure we understood what is being donated to the city. So we just generated, based off of that, how we can tackle making sure whether we can agree to certain donations or refuse them. So here we go. So the purpose of the donation policy is to provide a criteria and process for the acceptance of the donation, give the city the ability to accept donations that's needed in this capacity to maintain, allow for department heads to delegate authority, accept, or spend donations within the scope therein. So the definition, as we've defined it for the city, is going to be our cash or in-kind contributions which provide assistance to the city. Donations do not constitute a business relationship since no reciprocal consideration is sought. Donations generally qualify for a tax receipt. So that's in there as well. So the process for the donation policy, as you see at the bottom, we have an asterisk. We do want to make sure that people are not confused. The donation policy and application form does not apply to the reparations fund. That is going to be a different acceptance process. So I just want to put that out there. But as you see up here, you're going to have, the person will go in, they'll select the type of donation, they'll enter in the amount, and there'll be an application online. But this is just a breakdown of how that's going to go. Then there's the different forms for the arts donation, the miscellaneous donations, memorial tree form, and then there's going to be a memorial bench form, 2 different ones, but they're all going to go within the Public Works Department. The arts donation, I do want to add that that will then go to Public Arts Subcommittee, and then from there it will go to the Arts Council, and then they will decide whether what donations from art they will accept or will not accept. And I covered that early, but donors will submit the form to the department heads. So like I said, let's just hypothetically say it's something for Parks and Rec. Then Parks and Recs, once they fill out the form, they will receive that, and then they can decide whether they will accept that donation or they will not. If the department head approves a donation, staff contacts the donor to schedule a donation, installation, and other details. As I stated earlier, the arts donation will go to the Public Arts Subcommittee and then over to the Arts Council. Any questions? Sure.
Alderman Fisk, followed by Alderman Fleming.
So none of this is dependent on council approval? It doesn't come to council like public way naming comes to council?
It will, and it's specified in the donation policy. It depends on how big of a donation, especially if it's monetary. If it gets past a certain amount, then council will then have to approve certain.
What's that amount, Shanika? I'm sorry.
If I'm not mistaken, no, it's fine. I believe it's anything that is exceeded 5,000.
That seems
Okay.
like a very high
Yeah,
threshold.
I'm going to suggest that any of this, especially as we first get started with it, come to council.
Sure.
And especially that the ward alderman be notified at the very start of the process that there's been an application for donation.
Sure.
Donations are wonderful. I want to encourage donations.
sure.
But we, just in dealing with the various plaques and street naming, we have a process that people are we've been struggling with a little bit, not struggling, but certainly discussing at this committee for a long time. So I appreciate, you're coming back here, but I think we need to have the council a little bit more involved so that things don't get started and folks are making the assumption that something is going to occur without the council aware of it.
Sure. Okay.
I don't want to leave everything in department heads. That's a little bit too.
No, keep going. I just didn't.
No,
want
I'm
to-
done.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming?
Yes, I had one of those same questions. I was just going to ask if there was a report for the things that are listed in here that weren't coming to the council. My suggestion would be there would be some kind of report, but I'm fine if everything comes to us. I mean, I don't know how many donations we get now. I assume it's not going to clog up our agenda with these donations, but I think I read in here for the art that after it goes to the Arts Council, it will come here. That would be something I'd be interested in for public art installation, that we definitely have an idea what that looks like. And then my other question was regarding number 5, where it talked about zoning and procedure approvals. And I could have just read this wrong, but 5.1 says conditions, contributions, and public benefit may only be requested from an applicant seeking zoning approval from the city. Such requests are permitted or required by that decision-making process for zoning approval. So I guess I just needed some clarification what that is. So when you're going through zoning, if you have, I just need to hear kind of what that is. If you're going through zoning, you can make a donation before or after? I mean, I don't want to make sure we're not getting into sticky waters where someone is making and I know it says you cannot happen concurrently, but I just think we need to make sure that language is very clear that you cannot, before or after you go through zoning, that you're giving us some large gift.
Sure, I can modify that and clarify the language on the zoning part of it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right. Alderman Ravel, do you have a comment?
I was interested in that same provision that Alderman Fleming mentions, and also comparing it with item 7.4 that talks about, sort of makes a distinction between an applicant seeking approval for some kind of zoning versus an applicant who's merely seeking planning approval. I guess I'd like that 7.4 clarified as well.
Flushed out.
Because,
No, just agreeing, you want it flushed out a little bit more.
right, yeah. Just because one says we can't accept a gift if it's tied into the zoning approval process, but if it's a planning approval, then it's simply advise us. But and I guess it seemed to me there were a number of sort of more kind of editorial suggestions I would have, and so should we maybe submit that to you rather than try to talk through them all here?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right. Are you clear in the direction?
I am.
All
I
right,
got it.
thank you very much. It's a
All right,
very
thank you.
important topic, and we look forward to you bringing it back at our next meeting.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you,
right.
guys.
Thank you.
All right.
I know, she's okay. All right. Okay. We're now on item HS2. Staff's, so there's a resolution 14-R-20 supporting the Illinois legislation to enact legislation that allows terminally ill, 3 mentally capable adults the option to seek medical aid in dying. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
I can second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Before we get started, I just first want to thank all the people that came out. I have to be honest, in all that we have to vote on, this and resolutions like this are not something that we take lightly. And I want to make a statement because unfortunately I didn't have an opportunity to read this before it went public. And my personal statement is the person that approached me to ask for this to be reconsidered is someone that I hold very dear to me, who, when my father passed several years ago, was there for me the whole time. And so my reason for stating that and putting that out in the open is because if I would have written this, I would have written it a little bit differently. I'm not in support of the recommendation of the resolution, but going through that journey with my father, I am in support of seniors having dignity in whichever route that they choose, and I just want to make that clear. My personal feelings are always trumped by the right of the people to have a voice in any conversation as it relates. So I just hope that you can respectfully understand my position I think it's important that it goes to council, but based on my spiritual beliefs and cultural beliefs, I'm not in favor of this. And so I hope that we can move forward with the conversation, but I did feel that it was important to share that, and we'll take the lights. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that statement. So I was Chair of Human Services when this first came, and we had a conversation. And the struggle that we had at that meeting was what is the role of not only this committee but the City Council in passing along this resolution, or I may say any resolution. I certainly understand both positions that we heard tonight. But I don't think my opinion has really changed, even though I've given this a lot of thought. I don't think it's appropriate at this committee. This is not something that our city council has any jurisdiction over. I wish Representative Gable were still here. I would have some questions for her. Obviously, she has strong support to take to the state, and that's where this belongs, is at the state and not at the city. We can't make a decision here to allow within the borders of Evanston the option that you're seeking. It just doesn't exist for us. I do think that I'm very happy with the idea that you've started the discussion in the community, and that's where I think that discussion ends up. I want everyone to understand, first of all, that I have referred the subject of resolutions that come to the city, that are citizen generated, that come to the city, to the Rules Committee, so that we can have a conversation about this. I anticipate that there will be more citizens seeking resolutions, and we as a council need to decide how we're going to deal with them. Because what we're really being asked to do is make a personal statement of support, because we can't make an official statement of support because it's unlike an ordinance. For example, we have staff that researches, that provides us with a staff report. I mean, if you think about the news report on PBS. So news report on PBS, you have people there on both sides of an issue. They talk about the issue, and then you as a viewer can make up your mind. We have your advocacy, and that's very strong, and you've been very reasonable about that. And we also have the other side that has raised issues that are extremely serious. What I said at that meeting over a year ago, I think it was, that I don't feel, with the information that we have, that this is something that I can make an informed decision on. And especially since at that time, some of you who were here may remember that we asked Evonda Thomas, who was our director at that time, to come up and tell us what opinion our staff might have or the department might have on this. And she was not able to do that because we didn't ask staff to research this. We didn't expend money for staff to research this, and it is not. So I feel like I'm being asked to make a personal decision and explain that personal decision to the 8,000 people who are registered voters or live in my ward, and I don't have that information to do that. So if we're going to go ahead, and this is why I referred it to the Rules Committee, if we're going to go ahead and consider resolutions like this, then we need to decide what information that we need, what role do we play, especially in resolutions over which we have absolutely no jurisdiction. Do we expend staff time and expense on that, or don't we? That's a decision that we have to make. Our resources are limited, but if it's something that's important to the community, we need to do that. And that's where all of you can come in, and we have hopefully a decision on how we're going to approach these resolutions. But right now, I feel absolutely unqualified to make a decision. I understand where you're all coming from, and I understand that this is really important. And all of us have been in positions where we can empathize with the need. On the other hand, I also have questions about the potential abuse, and that's really worrisome to me. So I'm going to tell you that I don't feel qualified to make a decision on this, and I don't think that this resolution is properly in front of either this committee or the city council until we make a decision as a council on whether or not we're going to be considering resolutions over which we have some input. So I would say to Representative Gable that she's doing a fantastic job in reaching out and getting everyone involved and talking, and she can do that and take your advocacy with her to the state and say, these are the people in Evanston, these are the groups I've met with, these are the organizations I've met with, they all support me, and therefore I'm moving ahead with the state. But it doesn't belong here. And I'm really, I'm sorry to say that. I hope you all understand that. I have looked at our rules, and I don't see that this is appropriately here. So that's my position.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk. Alderman Ravel.
Well, I think there are three topics I want to touch on. One is the issue of the potential for abuse if this, if medical aid in dying became an option here in Illinois, and Alderman Fisk has mentioned concerns about that, as have some of people who spoke this evening. And it's my understanding is that we've got the state of Oregon that has had medical aid in dying for 20 years. They've had absolutely no evidence, no single instance where there was any hint of coercion or abuse, and then since Oregon has approved their medical aid in dying ordinance or legislation, and I think we're up to about 9 other states that have done that as well, and the momentum seems to be that recognizing that the process has been working well in Oregon. Other states are saying, well, we're hearing from residents in our state who really would like to have this option available as well. And so I see Illinois as joining this growing number of states that are ready to make this option available to their residents. It's very clear that it's only for terminally ill, mentally capable adults with only 6 months or less to live. It requires the involvement of 2 different physicians and 2 witnesses who are unrelated to the people involved, so that there are multiple safeguards in place to ensure that this option is exercised appropriately. The second issue I want to talk about is why should Evanston approve a resolution like this? I've been involved in a lot of public policy advocacy over the years, and both at the state level and the federal level, and in many instances it really takes the evidence of strong grassroots support from citizens to gain the credibility and the momentum that actually finally gets our state and federal legislators to pay attention and make the change that's needed. And I see the city of Evanston approving this resolution as demonstrating then that there is strong support here in the Evanston community. I have to say, a member of the organization of Faye Clayton came to my 7th Ward meeting just to talk about, this was after our discussion in Human Services. She came to present briefly the whole idea of medical aid in dying, and the group was just really so pleased and impressed that we were actually considering this, and a number of people came up to her afterwards and said they were really glad to hear from her on this. So I do believe that we have strong support in the community for our adding Evanston's voice that will help strengthen Representative Gable's voice in Springfield to make this a reality for citizens in Evanston. And then the third issue that Alderman Fisk has raised, and I agree, we need to have some guidelines about what kinds of resolutions we're going to entertain, because it can get to be a little much if we don't have some guidelines. And frankly, I would like to have guidelines so when citizens come to me and say, would you introduce X resolution? I have a way of saying, well, this falls within the kinds of guidelines of things that we're willing to entertain and consider, but, this other kind is not. It's outside of any kind of expertise we might have. So Alderman Fisk made the reference to the Rules Committee before I had a chance to, but I was planning to do that as well. I guess I view this particular resolution as kind of already in the pipeline, kind of like when a development proposal comes to us and it gets going through zoning, and then we on the City Council pass some kind of ordinance that adds some new restriction or new condition. The development proposal that's already in the pipeline is not required to comply with that later restriction or guideline, and I guess I think this particular resolution is already underway. We've already spent considerable council members' time on it, and I would like to see us take it on to council.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fleming.
Yes, so since there's so many of you all here, I'll give you my opinion. So I fall somewhere between Alderman Braithwaite and Alderman Fisk in that we do have a full council. I do think this is something that's, of the level that should go to the full council. I vote a lot of things forward to the full council because my peers should have an opinion. They represent parts of the city that I don't. My personal feelings are indifferent of what is best for the people I represent. I do have concerns, and we did talk about this at the last rules meeting. We had to continue it about the amount of resolutions we take here on the council, and that's really only because if you're here on a regular night, our meetings go very, very late, and there's a lot of business we unfortunately don't get to. This one, it's a tough one just for me because, again, it is something that's way out of my realm of expertise. I haven't polled people on my ward necessarily to see how they feel about it, but it's also something that as a city, we just, whatever the state decides, we will go ahead and do. I do understand how government works, so, Robin Gable has asked for a resolution, but I just don't think it's really within our capacity. And, I'm just not comfortable, giving a full opinion on something that is just so far out of my scope of expertise. Not that I'm an expert on many things, but, medical and people's personal choices is just not something that I personally would feel comfortable making a decision for anyone or telling them what they should do. And then as a city government, for us to weigh in so heavily on something that, again, is ruled by the state. So I am going to support this going forward to the council so that you all can have the opinions of all of our peers, since this is something that could impact if the state decides so, all of the citizens in Evanston, and obviously whatever our state governing body decides, we, of course, will implement, and I will work to make sure that all people, if this goes past, has the option to utilize whatever services they feel like are best for themselves and their loved ones, regardless of their income level, because I would obviously have some concerns that people who are on Medicaid and Medicare have the same rights to whatever options are available as someone who has private insurance. That would be something that's very important to make sure, if implemented, is something that is available to all people here in Evanston. I also do very much respect the voice of the people who oppose. I mean, those are things we have to consider on every decision we make. There's always a pro side and a con side. So I definitely respect them and want to hear and do a little of my own research in terms of the people who have opposed it. We don't really hear, from both sides all the time. And again, this being something that I haven't personally had to think through or, aside from what you all have presented me, really educated myself a lot on, I would like to just have some time to think through what the opposition has to say about it before it comes to council.
Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Are there any other comments? So I was just having a conversation with the director of the health department, and again, I wanted to look at how this is worded, and so I'm gonna just trust that. Do we need to make that decision now? I want to make sure that instead of recommending an adoption, that we're moving this to the council for full council conversation. And I don't know, I think I'll I mean, I'm where you are, Alderman Fleming, with, I think that a conversation like this should come before full council, but I'm not comfortable with the way the language reads right now. So I'm going to open it up for discussion so that we can move this forward to council, but rewritten.
Which language are you looking at? How it's written
Looking
in
at
the
the way
agenda?
HS2, I would have moved it to staff, but I don't think staff or human services.
So is there wording in the resolution that you are concerned about?
No,
or-
just the way it's written right now.
Yeah, I
So I move that well, you already moved and approved, so we would have to amend. So your stand instead of Resolution 14-R-20 supporting the Illinois legislature, sir, you would say Resolution 14-R-20 moving, so you would make a motion to move Resolution 14-R-20 so you don't,
City Council for
It's
to
discussion
full City Council for discussion.
Correct.
without recommendation.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to make that?
It's without recommendation.
Yes.
You're just moving it
I
to
wanted to
council
go
with
to council
discussion.
to discussion.
Right.
Right.
Right. I would support the change of language.
And would you support it then to move to council
No.
with that? You're still going to be a no?
Right.
All right.
I just don't think it's appropriate to do
Fair
that
enough.
without.
All right,
I
so
understand.
can I ask our legal counsel, just so we can have our words together? So it was already moved and seconded. Will we need to just amend the first motion?
Yes, the who I don't recall who actually made the motion.
I think Eleanor did.
Yes.
But she could either accept a friendly amendment, or someone else can simply just move to amend the prior
Well,
motion.
to sort of speed things up, so I will accept the friendly amendment that so the motion is that the Human Services Committee agrees to move this on to council for
Yeah.
Discussion without recommendation.
I mean,
You can just say move
just
forward
that,
with discussion is fine.
yeah,
I mean,
that's the friendly amendment I accept.
okay.
I can second that.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favors of making the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you all very much for coming out. Oh, pardon me, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to move item HS2 as amended?
So moved.
Now we're going to vote on it. So there's a motion to move item HS2 as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right. The ayes have it. Thank you all very much for coming out. And if we can, this will be at our next council meeting?
On Monday.
Pardon me?
Next Monday.
Next Monday. We'll see you then. Have a good evening. Thank you. All right, moving along to item S3. I'd like to move what is this for action? 2019 Health Board funded programs and summary of the programs requested for funding in 2020 report. Staff recommends the Human Services Committee accept and place on file the 2019 Mental Health Board funded programs and summary programs requesting funding in 2020. Is there a report on this?
I move approval.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any comments, questions?
I have some questions, but is there a staff here?
That's what I was asking. Is there staff here for this? Who did this fall under?
Jessica Wingener is the staff for the committee.
Do we want to, I mean, are you comfortable holding? Do you want to hold or do you want to?
I mean, it can go to council. I still have the same questions. I'm going
Okay.
I'm a no to the two that missed the deadline initially. But I also have questions about a couple other funding options.
Okay.
So I'm happy to move to council and ask my questions there if there's no staff here, which looks like there is
Okay.
no staff.
I think this is time sensitive just because of, okay, all right. Do you
So
want to state
I'm
your
happy to move it to
questions-
staff, and I can ask my questions at council if we can have a staff there.
You want to state your questions publicly? Or do you
Oh,
want to
sure,
do it-
sure.
Okay.
All right, so I have, just for the sake of following the rules, we had two organizations that didn't miss the deadline, so I would reject those. And then my question has to do with Child Care Network of Evanston. Their Learning Together program is being funded at 40%, and I know for Mental Health Board, they stick to around a 30% or less threshold on funding so that they're not the primary funding source. So I'm trying to get a question answered there. And then also for Child Care Network of Evanston for their scholarship fund. In the description, it says they did not apply for funding for 2020, and I was just trying to figure out if that was like state funding or what other funding, because that one is also at 83%. The Mental Health Board is funding them, or the City of Evanston, I guess, is funding them. So just kind of questions in terms of the financial longevity of that program.
Director Bobo, if you can follow up with staff, and it's been properly noted. Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Fleming. All those in favor of...
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
trying to do my light here.
My apologies. Alderman Ravel?
I think we're just being asked to accept the report and place it on file, and it's what the report is on the 2019 funded programs. This isn't a request yet for the 2020 funding. That we're just being told who has applied for 2020 funding. I don't know if that...
Okay, let me read this. So the 2020 funding request.
Right, we've seen this shows us what the requests are, but it's not what the Mental Health Board has actually made a decision. They're making their decision, I think, in February. At their
Okay, thank you for that clarification then.
All right. Okay, we'll move right along. All those in favor of accepting and putting on file item HS3, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Item HS4, Health and Human Services General and Emergency Assistance Update. Sindira? Move. I just need a second.
Oh, second.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. Indira Perkins, Human Services Manager, Health and Human Services. Hello to the committee, Chair Braithwaite, Director Ogbo. I'm here to answer any questions about the report that I submitted.
How about you give us a quick little overview?
Sure. Well, I currently manage the Health and Human Services General Assistance Department. We provide financial assistance to low-income residents in need. Our General Assistance Program is a month-to-month stipend that they can qualify to go towards their housing, utilities, and personal assistance needs. And our Emergency Assistance is a one-time help in a 12-month period that goes towards their rent, mortgage, or utilities. We also provide transportation cards as well as gift cards to various grocery stores for those that are come in seeking food assistance.
Alderman Fleming, followed by Alderman Ravel.
Yes, thank you. So I had the pleasure of speaking to the director today about kind of the program enhancements that was brought to our attention. So I'll just make my public comments here, which are, I appreciate that you kind of continue to remind us in this report that affordable housing and transitional housing continues to be a problem here in Evanston. We know that obviously we're working on it as a council, but it's good to know that, you know, for us to hear what you guys are seeing out in the field. So my question and my hope is that we will, you all can be thinking about how more to get people employed. I know that's something that's on your radar, but that we really use some collaborations with our nonprofit or, you know, educational communities here to really, I know we have some clients who have been on for quite some time, and I appreciate that we have the help for them, but I'm always concerned about the next pool of people who are going to come up and need support, particularly with the changes with SNAP and all those things that are out of our guidelines. So I think that Ike will share with his team. We had a very productive meeting with Oakton Community Colleges today, and they had a lot of workforce ideas that some of the population can utilize. My other question here is about, sorry, can you give the breakdown, it might be in here, about how much you can access the population or the participants can have for housing versus food and the like? Because I think that's in here, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, sure. So the max amount for housing for general assistance is $600 per month. And then the max assistance that we can provide for a one-time help for emergency assistance is up to $1,500.
Okay, and if you're getting the 600 for housing, how much additional can you have for the personal and food?
So it's on a case-by-case basis, but the max that someone could qualify is about $985 total,
Okay.
including the housing portion.
Okay, so being that we are not part of the township anymore, and I continue to say that because we don't have so many of the restrictions of the township, do you all, I'd be interested to know if you have clients who come in who are maybe getting Social Security, but it's still not a substantial amount. I know right now, if you're getting another government subsidy, you also then cannot qualify for general assistance, which I think was a township rule. I'd be interested to see if we have, particularly our seniors coming in who are having a hard time, making ends meet, who have Social Security, but could benefit from some other type of assistance that we might be able to offer them outside of the township rules.
So when we
to
took
follow them.
over the township services, we did get rid of that rule because there, in our emergency assistance manual, it said that if you were receiving any other type of government cash assistance, you were ineligible for our emergency assistance program. So we did eliminate that rule. And so now that we have seniors coming in, and if they have Social Security, retirement, disability, we do help them on our emergency assistance program.
But they're not eligible for general assistance.
They're not eligible for general
And
assistance.
is that just our own in-house rule, or is that still a township
That's
rule?
still the state rule in regards to general assistance.
But do we file, I guess the clarification, we follow the state rule since we're not a township?
Yes.
We do still? Okay. All right, so you can go on to Alderman.
Alderman Ravel.
Just a couple of questions. So I heard from a resident who was interested in this particular report and the fact that our SNAP benefits were delayed, I guess, last year when the state was taking its time processing things. And the resident's question was, well, did Evanston eventually get some funding from the state to make up for the fact that we had to provide that extra food assistance, or?
So no, we don't get any type of reimbursement from the state.
Okay.
For any of our emergency assistance programs
Okay.
or general assistance.
Right. So the fact that we had to step in and help our residents was just too bad.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad we could do it, though. But the SNAP program is functioning okay now?
It's functioning. We meet with DHS quarterly. Every time that we go to the meetings, they're always reporting that there's a bit of a delay in processing the applications. They have gotten better. So I believe right now it's like a 30-day window. That's much better than 90 days.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then I guess my other question is, so we saw quite an increase in 2019 compared to 2018.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering what we're anticipating for 2020.
I'm not sure. What
Under
we're-
this
what-
current president, we can expect, I'm being serious.
Well, yes. I mean, I will tell you that the summer is always one of our peak times. So I can have a better idea of what our numbers are looking like and what our spending is like, at that point in time. Summer and then right after the holidays. So right now we're getting an influx of applications, people coming in for emergency assistance. So those are our peak times. I do expect that we'll utilize most of the allocated funding for this year. You're welcome.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
So in terms of her question, in terms of SNAP, so we know that the federal government just made some changes to SNAP, which I'm sure are going to affect our population. And so, again, I'm very interested in the program, obviously. So I don't know if we do it yearly or quarterly or something, but I would love to get a kind of report to just see how we're doing with that, because we know those changes are happening, and probably, unfortunately, other changes to people who are already having a hard time. And then you weren't here when I said it because it was at the end of one of our meetings, but I want to thank you and your team for the excellent work you did with the family that I referred over from the 9th Ward. You guys did a fabulous job and really provided some life-saving support for that family. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Quick question, Dara. How do we compare to our neighboring cities in terms of the amount of assistance that our local government provides our residents?
Our grants, our monthly grants that we provide for general assistance are quite similar in the amounts. However, we have a significantly higher number of general assistance clients that we serve. You know, when I go to our township meetings and visit with some of the neighboring communities, they don't have caseloads as big as ours.
Got it.
But they also don't provide many of the services that we do.
Yeah.
We have a little bit more freedom being under the city rather
Sure.
than the township.
Sure. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And if I could just build on what Alderman Fleming has said, myself, Fleming, and Alderman Rainey, through your efforts, have had an opportunity to meet with our residents and a few others who participate in the General Assistance Program, just asking those really tough questions like, how do you feel that you've been treated? How has the program helped you to move forward in whatever difficult circumstance? And I've actually participated, I think, in 2 discussions, and the feedback that we're getting from our residents that the program is working, they're very appreciative of the efforts of staff, my observations of you, Director Obobo, and whoever else is involved, that they're very professional and caring when dealing with our most vulnerable residents. So I think I want you to hear that, because you probably don't hear thank you enough in your day-to-day interactions, but I don't receive many complaints at all in the services that you do. And I think it's also worth mentioning, myself and Alderman Fleming participated in a conversation with one of our community service partners, and just the dialogue that took place was meaningful, and I think it helped to close some gaps where we had misunderstanding, and the commitment that our staff has moving forward to maintaining that relationship, I think, will just only help our residents, and it's also just a testament of how hard you work. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept and place on file item HS4?
So moved.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Seeing no lights for discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item HS5. Who's got that?
That's me.
Okay. Do you want to stay right here, or do you want to go? It's your call. If you want to go on camera, why not? There she is.
Good day, Human Services Committee. Ike Ogbo, Director, Health and Human Services Department. Are there any questions in regards to the report?
Well, how about you give us a high-level overview, sir?
Absolutely. So this came up to my laps. It is a matter that involves how the city should embark on providing a city-designated homeless shelter when our homeless shelters here in Evanston are overwhelmed. So it came on my lap, and we've embarked on a number of strategies to see that this comes to fruition. We've hit maybe a number of roadblocks in regards to, making this something that will happen. And one being, having a location where you will have a city-designated shelter. One has been located, but we also have an issue of Robert Crown being the designated location for our homeless shelter being demolished in these upcoming weeks. So that's one of the issues that we're having now, providing this designated shelter where we're going to have a permanent location. And this location will only happen if the other shelters that we have by other community partners are overwhelmed or overloaded. So that's one of the issues that we're facing now. Another issue that we're also facing is how we're going to staff this designated city shelter. It's not something that we've actually budgeted for this year, but if it ever happens, we are going to rely on our community partners, their volunteers, to staff and provide coverage for this homeless shelter. So that's pretty much the overview. The overview is pretty much that we're are trying to see ways in which we can help our community, our homeless community, so that they have a place to be when the weather is inclement, when a cold weather advisory is issued. So, are there any questions?
So I just received a text message from Alderman Rainey that unfortunately we don't have video.
Oh.
Or maybe it just popped back on. But hopefully we have audio. And I don't know if anyone's back in the AV booth who's paying attention, but let me see. I got. She was on District 65, not on the city. So we'll continue to move forward. Alderman Fleming.
Yeah, so thank you.
Followed by Alderman Ravel.
The director is so very polite. This fell on my lap. So for the last year, I have been bugging the city manager about my concerns with people who don't have homes sleeping outside in our city. And it is, I think we don't see them as much as other municipalities do, but they are there. And I have many concerns and many nights of which I think about them. Thankfully, maybe not thankfully with global warming, it hasn't been that cold this year, but we know last year, 2 years ago, we had that horrific snow where we had lots of people. And thankfully, through Interfaith, our churches have now opened up every night. And also the church where, unfortunately, the young lady lost her life has also opened up. But I check in with Sue at Interfaith all the time, and they are to capacity, even though we are not in frigid temperatures. So the director has been very kind to kind of pick this up and work and try to figure it out. He was very accurate. We thought Robert Crown would be a win because it's an old building that is empty that we're going to be knocking down soon. So we thought we can kind of get through some cold nights. We haven't had them, but we also haven't kind of figured out this quite the staffing situation. And the staffing we need actually is only from midnight till 5 in the morning, because other than that, we do have a paid staff still at the building. So anyhow, I am hoping, fingers crossed, the weather remains so that we don't have a cold weather advisory. But, if we think about, we also have people who are not necessarily homeless, but, your pipes go out in the middle of the night or something happens and you maybe can't afford a hotel to get to. So I think this is something that I would like us to, as a council, can continue to think about. I know staff will continue to work on it. We will have to figure out, once Robert Crown is demolished, if we have a place, and how we go about making sure, we are serving all of our residents, whether they are taxpayers or not. And right now, Interfaith is doing the best they can, and they tend to give out train cards, and people are riding the train throughout the night. But, we know that that is not a solution, and we know that the trains are not always accommodating as well. So, it's something that's near and dear to my heart, so I'm going to kind of keep plugging away at this, and the director has been very, very kind to kind of be thinking with me how we can make this happen and serve our residents better.
All very important issues. Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Alderman Ravel.
Well, I want to echo Alderman Fleming's thanks, because it is a really important issue. We can't have people sleeping outside when it gets that cold. I guess my question is, what exactly is our temperature at which we consider it a cold advisory? Because it says minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit is really cold.
So that's actually the wind chill factor. So that there's a difference between the wind chill factor and the actual temperature.
Okay.
So the wind chill factor is not the actual temperature, but when you are in a cold situation, what happens is, if you have that cold hit against your skin, keep in mind the skin produces heat, right? So when it produces that heat, it produces that heat in order to protect the skin. And when you have a strong wind that comes across the body, what it does is remove that layer of protection. Now you're exposed. You're not just exposed to that wind chill factor, but you're also exposed to the temperature, which is quite dangerous. So 30 degrees, minus 30 degrees, that's the wind chill factor, but that's not the temperature.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure that we were taking care of people before it got to be that
And it's
cold.
something that we're taking a look at, that it might not even get to negative 30, because we can actually have our own rules on when we will declare a cold weather advisory. We can do that. We can decide we'll do it at 5 degrees Fahrenheit. We can decide that we do it at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's something that I'll work on to come up with a number
Okay,
in which a
yeah.
cold weather advisory will be declared.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Would you be willing, looking in here, we don't have the snow, and I know a couple years ago when we had that horrible snow, I don't think it was as cold, but we had a ton of snow. So maybe we need to think about the snow. And then again, I'm not an environmentalist, but if things go as people predict, we're going to have some super hot summers, and that might at one point become an issue as well. With same thing, people sleeping outside when it's unbearably hot.
Yeah, and also talking about that, we do have a heat advisory, and a number of our facilities are open to the public. A number of the city facilities are open to the public where they can come in and cool off. So, but not overnight. We don't have anything overnight, no.
Alderman Fisk.
Yes, what number of people are we talking about? How many fall into this category? Would you guess in the worst case conditions?
So Interfaith, who is a community partner, and historically they've housed our homeless population. So each facility, there are 6 facilities across the board, where each facility accommodates our homeless population for 3 weeks. So one facility accommodates for 3 weeks, and they can only accommodate about 38 individuals. They have about 38 beds. So anything over that is pretty much overwhelming their facilities. There have been situations where they had to, of course, because they couldn't send them away, accommodate up to 50 individuals. So whatever that is above that 38 are the individuals who will be seeking a homeless shelter elsewhere.
So how many exceed the 38? I mean, what number are we trying to?
Well, I'll have to. I don't have the proper statistics, but I can get that information to you.
Okay.
But like I mentioned, each facility accommodates 38, and anything that is above that we'll be looking for another shelter.
Yeah, and I understand that, but the number above gives us some flexibility in
Absolutely.
terms of how large a facility we need. And, I'm thinking close to transportation, maybe there's some other churches that might work.
And it's something that I've also asked our interfaith manager about. These are there other facilities that we can use, other faith-based establishments that we can use, and the answer has kind of been no. So we can continue to explore that avenue and see what we can get. But for right now, there really aren't, except for these 6. That goes from November to March, and each facility provides about 3 weeks of accommodation to our homeless population. But
Right.
we could continue to explore.
I understand that, but I think a rough idea of a number would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
So in the super cold nights we had, whenever we had the polar vortex, whatever we had, they had about 50 people. And so if we say 38 is capacity, so maybe it's 12, maybe it's 15. I do know from when I served the homeless, they kind of, before the night, dinner closes at about 6, I think, at most churches. They're kind of deciding if they're going to even try, because Interfaith doesn't open until 10, 9? 9, so that's 3 hours. You still have to account for your time. So I think people are kind of deciding if they're going to go down to the city, or they're trying to make the best plan. So I don't know how, it's hard to know how many, although the homeless count just happened with the Alliance 2-3 weeks ago. So I will ask for those numbers. They try to count all the homeless. But I think, it's hard to know. We have some folks sleeping in their cars. But yeah, I think that the churches would, be good. I think the ones who want to participate are already participating. Yeah. I know when we had the really cold weather, some were really pinched because they have higher heat bills, and they don't necessarily have a higher congregation to pay those heat bills. So maybe if we're going to ask that might be something we can help subsidize for them, because they do have costs associated with it as well.
Right. Well, we just added First Methodist.
You did.
So it's. But I think as the word gets out, I think if First Methodist gets their program going and it's working, maybe they can expand a little bit. And but we need to have facilities that are within walking distance or transportation of the people who need it, not.
No, we thought about that, but we don't have many city facilities, so then we were limited
I know.
to what we.
But that's a nice way for not-for-profits who, to contribute, an appropriate way for
I concur.
not-for-profits to contribute.
I concur.
Yep.
All right. Seeing no further lights for comments or questions, all those in favor of putting this on file, item HS4, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
point of correction, I believe this is HS5.
What did I say? Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Yeah. We can. We'll make it quick. Just all those in favor of putting on file the City of Evanston Emergency Shelter for Homeless update, item HS5, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes carry. Thank you. Items for discussion. I thought you were speaking on that, so I was like gesturing to you.
The animal shelter. Hi, my name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. I'm here tonight to just make the committee aware of an opportunity that has come up. Cook County has, through their initiative of Housing Cook County Animals, released information calling for proposals for a grant program that they have to do capital improvements at an animal shelter. They are setting aside $8 million to be awarded to 2 or more animal shelter facilities, who would do the capital improvements and then enter into a long-term contract to receive impounded Cook County animals. So the city of Evanston is interested in this. Many of you may be aware that a couple of years ago, we came to you saying the animal shelter is in really bad condition, and staff was directed to go do research on what would be appropriate for an animal shelter. We have actually been wrapping that up just in time for this call for grants, so we're pretty well able to define what we think is necessary in terms of animal shelter facilities. The Evanston Animal Shelter Association operates our animal shelter, but the city of Evanston actually owns the building. So the city of Evanston will be partnering with the Animal Shelter Association, but we'll be taking the lead on the grant application since it's a capital improvement grant. And so I'm planning on bringing a presentation to the February 10th council meeting to talk about it in a lot more detail. But I did want to make this committee, or give this committee the opportunity to ask any questions they might have, or if they had any concerns, so they can make sure that I either address it tonight or we can include it in the presentation for next week.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I have talked to with Vicki Pasenko, who is the director of the VAO, Volunteer Animal Organization. She is confident that they can accommodate Cook County's animal requirements, as well as the city of Evanston, and is actually very, very excited and very supportive of our seeking the grant. I did want to make everyone aware of a letter from Larry Suffredin that went out today, and I'll just read it for the record. This is to Thomas Wake, the administrator of the Cook County Animal and Rabies Control in Bridgeview. It's regarding the Evanston Animal Shelter. A home for Cook County's animals application. It's Dear Dr. Wake. I want to express my support for Evanston Animal Shelter's application for a home for Cook County animals to help shelter Cook County's stray animals. The Evanston Animal Shelter and Adoption Center provides compassionate and humane care to Evanston's abandoned, abused, and relinquished animals and works to find them homes. Between 2016 and 2019, the Evanston Animal Shelter has taken care of over 2,290 animals while posting a live release rate of 97%. As the Cook County Commissioner for District 13, I support the intent of the Evanston Animal Shelter in obtaining grant funding to house Cook County's animals. Sincerely, Larry Suffredin. So that's great. That's great to get that support from him, and thank staff very much for their work on this as well.
Sure, thank you.
Question, Laura, you mentioned that there were some studies that serve on the board, so I'm kind of curious, just like high level, what type of scope have you come up with based on the research that you've done?
So the existing animal shelter building is deficient in a number of ways. which some of which we knew about, which is that it's just too small,
Right.
and that also it does not meet code requirements for an animal shelter. It's sort of grandfathered in just because it's been the animal shelter for a while, but it basically some stuff that in retrospect seems fairly obvious, but it doesn't have any medical exam room or any place for a veterinarian to come in and do any kind of medical exams. It doesn't have isolation rooms for sick animals. There's very few windows, so most of the animals are never exposed to natural light unless it happens to be a dog that goes out walking with a volunteer. Cats in modern day care animal shelter facilities, healthy cats are generally paired into rooms. So you might have a room with 8 to 10 cats that get along pretty well. And so not being confined to a cage if they're a healthy adult cat is considered the modern day standard, but we don't have the ability to do that. Certain types of kennel facilities for dogs. So these types of things are, again, none of them are rocket science. We have one room for adoption. So if 2 people show up to adopt, then one waits, or one goes outside with the dog, or one goes into the bathroom and uses that as a second adoption area. And these kinds of things could really only be fixed with a facility that is designed to be an animal shelter.
Yeah. Do you have any renderings that would show the scale in relationship to the current footprint, or is that still in the works?
It's still in the works, but it appears that it would be a building approximately twice the size of the current animal shelter. We looked at trying to save the animal shelter building and do an addition on it. It presents its own challenges, and it was causing a really weird layout for the building. We think it would be better to demolish it.
Yeah.
Part of the reason being just because the way it's designed with the pitched roof and one story, it doesn't lend itself to being added on at all.
Sure.
So I think it would be probably better to knock it down. It would certainly look better once it's built.
And Alderman Fisk, before you ask your question, I do have one concern. Is you mentioned the examination room, so I'm curious to know what type of policies we would have to create and who would be responsible for running that. I know we have a volunteer that's I'm sure a number of volunteers that are veterinarians, and I've seen statistics that show how much support that they have for the animals, so I'm very curious to know how that portion would work.
I think currently what's happening is that in most cases, volunteers from the Animal Shelter Association are transporting dogs and cats that need veterinarian care to the offices of vets. And we actually still pay the vets in most cases. Maybe we pay discounts or at cost, but not always when we're just paying vets. So not me, the Evanston Animal Shelter Association would enter most likely into a contract with a veterinarian to come on site and do those services on site a couple days a week.
Got it. Alderman Fisk.
Thanks. I wanted to just make sure that we're not painting a dire picture of the conditions at the animal shelter. While there are a lot of challenges for an outdated animal shelter, the volunteer animal organization, remember all of that struggle we went through to get them here, they're doing an extraordinary job. I mean, the numbers of people that they have that are fostering and keeping the animals in it's socialized, and it's just amazing. And so I didn't want people to think that we were keeping animals in a building with no windows and locked in cages, because that's not what's happening. If you haven't been over to the shelter, please go over there, because the volunteers are just so enthusiastic and so positive. I'm so proud of them. And I think a new facility will be wonderful for them, but they're doing a good job now. And I just didn't want people to think that this was an awful place where animals were being held. My question is, how do you think we're going to handle the transition if we do get the grant and we build a new building? And this building comes down, where do we go? What are we going to do?
That is an interesting question that we are still trying to figure out our options. It would be very challenging to continue to house the animals on what is essentially an active construction site, even if we somehow phase it or relocate the building so it's not knocking down the entire building. The issue really revolves around housing dogs in kennels because they're much more challenging than cages of cats. And so we have started kind of floating ideas with the animal shelter about how to do that. If the city of Evanston had a vacant property, a storefront that we owned, we might consider maybe relocating the administrative offices and the
Like
cats
a
to there.
recycling center or something big like that?
Not sure how available that will be in our time frame, but we're still working on how do we handle dogs, because that is a challenge. Dogs in kennels require more space and are more active than cats. And you're absolutely right about the animal shelter organization. The one thing this has really given me the opportunity to see is just how amazing it is. The majority of the animals that go through the shelter are actually not housed very long at the shelter. They're put in fostering situations. But there are times when you really do need to have the cages, first of all, during the adoption period when the animal's ready to come back and eligible for adoption, and also just if an animal needs to be isolated, if it's in a holding period for some reason, rabies or observation or other reasons. So we do need to have a certain amount of cages, but I totally agree with you that the amount of enrichment, it's over 175 volunteers staff 14 shifts a week at the animal shelter. It's really an incredible operation.
Seeing no further lights for questions or comments, thank you very much. All right. Next up, we have HSD2, drug testing policy update.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Committee, Deputy City Attorney Nicholas Cummings. The Law Department is currently working with Human Resources to modify the employee handbook and more specifically identify positions that we would be going to the various unions to try and negotiate whether they would be covered by like the current policy as it is now, or if we would have a little more flexibility given the passage of recreational and medicinal use in Illinois. If there's any questions.
I'm sure there are a lot of questions. You going to start?
Sure.
All right, go ahead.
So you're going to the union to ask about if we can pull back the reins on our zero tolerance policy. Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
No, we are identifying specific positions that we would have to go to the union in order to negotiate into their collective bargaining agreements if they were to change from the current policy.
Let me take a stab at it. I think it would be helpful just for members of the committee as well as anyone who's listening to this, because this is a very charged topic. And my question to you, Deputy Attorney, would be, let's start with the classifications that are now currently under the old law required to be tested. And
Yes.
what are those conditions who they are, and what are the conditions of why they're tested, if that makes sense?
So currently, the rule book requires safety sensitive positions.
Okay.
It is those job descriptions that we need to identify what is specifically a safety sensitive position.
Okay.
If it is a safety sensitive position, it will not change.
So police, fire, truck
Correct.
drivers are the ones that I'm familiar with. Is there
Yes.
any other classification?
Anyone with a CDL, anyone that's covered by the Department of Transportation, or any other federal regulation, or any positions that receive federal funding, it would stay the same for them.
Okay.
What we're talking about is any other positions that might be non-safety sensitive that may be covered by the union or not covered by the union, but we need to identify what those are and then look at those job descriptions to ensure they're not safety sensitive. I've also had discussions with Human Resources to say specifically we will put in the job description, this is a safety-sensitive position. So then it's not questioned whether you're covered by the policy or not.
Right.
So once those positions are identified, if they are union positions, we have to go to the union and say, because they may have a contract that specifically already says zero tolerance, as an example. So we would need to bring that to the union and see if that can be changed or if they're willing to negotiate over those particular positions, be they safety sensitive or not. If the union feels that they are not, and we feel that they are, or vice versa. That sort of thing is what I'm talking about, negotiating with the union.
Sure. And so outside of the union, so this category makes sense, police, fire, anyone driving a vehicle. I'm also concerned, or I should say I've received concern from staff who would like to be able to use recreational marijuana in the same way they would consume alcohol. So in the privacy of their homes, not while they're working and interacting. And I'm curious just to get a landscape as you are moving forward in your questions and policy. I would like for the last year, all the staff that have been drug tested, placed in categories, and also by race and age. Is that a fair question?
It's a fair question. I would have to talk to Human Resources to find out if that data is readily available. It's my understanding that the drug testing and even the alcohol testing is based on particular criteria of the supervisors.
Sure.
So I will see if that information can be readily made available.
Yeah. And to include the criteria, of course, as well.
The criteria is actually spelled out in the handbook.
Okay.
Currently.
Yeah.
So I can definitely include that criteria. Just so that I'm clear, it would be specifically just the numbers that you would be looking for.
Correct. Not the names, but by department. Can we do positions, Director? Yeah.
So, and Mr. Chair, just to be clear, you're only asking for those that have been randomly tested.
Correct.
On the request of a supervisor.
Correct.
Okay.
So the context and the reason for my questions, and this is prior to you being here, there have been staff that feels that testing and question is somewhat, it's sometimes weaponized, right? If someone is looking for a way of, they can ask that question. So I'm curious. Right now it's all anecdotal for me. I want statistics and to understand who we're currently testing right now, and that will help me as we are receiving your information to make good policy decisions. I mean, I have my own thoughts and opinions, but that really doesn't matter. I like to have data in front of me as well, right? Fair enough?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll take that referral.
Any other questions, comments? Alderman Fleming, I'm sorry, your light's on.
No, that's okay. Thank you for asking a more poignant question than mine. So you said for the last year, I would love to see a more extensive report than that because, a year is a year, right? I'd like to see if we can get the data together. And I think we have, I feel like it came to Human Services at some other point, or maybe it came to executive session. So I would dare to say I would like it to go back maybe 5 years because I think that gives us a better idea if we're looking at a pattern or not a pattern, and what that means. So so I know we have to go to the union. And when you say safety, I understand with police and fire and all that, but would you quantify or would you classify someone who is a cashier as safety, or are we talking about physical safety and harm to another person, right? Or would you quantify counting thousands of dollars as a job where, that would fall under?
The definition as, and I'm paraphrasing because I
That's
don't
fine.
have it memorized from the employee handbook, of a safety sensitive position is someone who is charged with the safety of the public or their coworkers.
Okay.
Generally,
Okay.
I'm
That's
paraphrasing
fine.
loosely,
No,
but
that's fine.
so I would say a cashier probably would not meet that.
But some people would think that's, So my other question is, and so we have non-union positions, right? And we have the authority to make some changes for those people. So is it currently the thought or the direction this is going that you're going to work with the unions first, and then what the unions decide will be also implemented for our non-union, or are we moving forward with making some changes to the policy for non-union employees.
To be clear, the policy would have to apply across the board. It's just that we don't have to negotiate with anyone else to apply it to city employee who are exempt from union participation.
Right, I understand that. So if we were to change the policy, say we change the policy next week, we're negotiating with the unions, we understand that the union obviously would have to say, or you would have to do some other negotiation with the union.
We would likely have to negotiate with the union first before it could actually become policy for everyone.
Okay, so if the union say, no, we want everybody to follow zero tolerance, we're not doing anything else. What you're saying then is our non-union employees would still have to remain zero tolerance because we could not change our handbook, because if we changed our handbook, everyone would fall under that category, even though our union workers are not.
It would more likely than not require more creative editing of the handbook.
Can I follow up with your question? Because I think I know where you're going. Do you mind?
Well, I'm looking for fair treatment, right? So people who are union, they understand there's some other union things to go along with that. But our staff that are non-union are non-union. So just like before you came here, there were times where we gave the union staff a raise and not the non-union staff. So I know that there's ways we can treat people a little bit differently. I understand your point about the rule book, but I would hate for our non-union workers to be penalized, so to speak, from something that is now legal because the unions have decided for their staff that they do not want them to partake for whatever reason.
And that's understandable. I'm not saying that the handbook would not be changed. I'm just saying that it would take some more time. For example, if the unions say no, under your example, the unions say no, we would still have to go and if we make the decision for the rest of the staff that they would be allowed, we would just need to creatively amend the handbook to only include or exclude certain positions.
Okay. So my other question is, and I know the report we asked for had to do with random testing, but I'm more interested also in pre-employment screening. Because we, if I'm correct now, and I don't have the handbook in front of me either, but we screen people as they are finalists for employment here and
transfers.
And marijuana had been illegal. And so I assume if we screen you, you test positive, you could be out because you have an illegal substance in your body. Is that correct?
One of the challenges that I've discussed with HR is having familiarity with the science on how we're testing for cannabinoids. In my previous career as a prosecutor, the presence of cannabinoids was a yes or no question. Now in the age of legalization of cannabinoids, there is a test to determine a certain level, and that is a discussion that we're having with HRs to determine the level that someone can test at and still be fine. Because the reality situation is, in the example that was discussed, was you have an employee who uses recreationally on the weekends, has an incident on like a Wednesday, gets tested as a result of this incident, and it's going to be positive for cannabinoids, but the issue is whether they're under the influence of those cannabinoids or not at the time of the incident. And so there is a test that has been developed to determine those levels, but I'm not familiar enough with the science for that to be part of what we add into the rule book just yet.
And do we test for alcohol for people who are coming in for employment?
My understanding is based on the handbook we do, it's 0.02.
So the same level?
It's different. It's different numbers.
But
yes.
There's a level testing, so
Yes.
you can have 2 beers and come in for an interview on Monday. And I'm just throwing it out there, right? I mean, there's a level we're looking for.
Yes.
Okay, that would exclude you potentially from employment.
Yes.
Okay, so I would be, if we're using a level system, just so you know, as you're writing this, I would be more in favor of some kind of testing in that way. Again, because if we're allowing you to have 2 beers or however many beers you're having and get a job here, now that marijuana is legal, you should be able to have whatever that constitutes and still be eligible for employment here. I'm concerned with the random testing. I would think we probably do that a little bit less. I'm more concerned with people who are not eligible to be employed here in the city, being that we are one of the largest employers and we are receiving tax dollars from the sale of cannabis. So that's my larger concern.
That is definitely something that we discussed in terms of addressing is the pre-employment screening and how we would address that. One of the suggestions was looking at how the Illinois State Police are planning to enforce DUI in that level, whatever level that is in terms of impairment. But again, I don't know if our facilities that we contract with to do testing, whether it be pre-employment or random, utilize that same procedure or science in order to test levels. So that's another issue we have to work out. I don't at this point, no. It's something that having just started on the 21st, I picked up and started working on almost immediately. I feel like it's definitely something that could be a good win for the city early on, at least in my tenure here. But I can't tell you specifically, oh, this is a hard date that we're going to have it completed. I'm sorry.
Yeah. There.
It is near the top of my agenda.
So, Attorney Cummings, listen to him. I think he's going to do well here. I want to put my spin on her question. So it's clear that anyone who falls in the classification of a union has resources. They will have someone there to advocate for them as well, defend whatever position just by the mere fact that they're in a union, correct?
You're referring to discipline?
Well, I'm just referring to the conversation. So when you're in a union, you're in a collective body, you have designees who will advocate for your position, whatever it is, after an internal discussion. And if need be, unions have the ability to lawyer up very quickly, just in terms of how they choose to advocate. I think, and I don't want to put words in Alderman Fleming's mouth, the question would be for our non-union employees. So how are you and any other staff that's interacting with them as you are shaping this policy? Do they have an opportunity to provide feedback? Do they have an opportunity to provide feedback anonymously where they don't have to disclose whether or not they choose to smoke? I don't know if that's where you were going, but as you were speaking and formulating your questions, that's what came to mind. So I've been approached by a number of employees who like the freedom now of the passing of the legislation, but they're very concerned about their jobs. And I just want to make sure to those who trusted to ask me the question that they will have an opportunity to participate in some meaningful way to where they can express their thoughts and opinions, as well as the staff who have to work alongside them. I think for this to be a win, to use your words, it's a collaborative effort where we're listening to both sides. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And I'm not opposed to accepting that feedback, but understand that my position as a deputy city attorney is to do what's in the best interest of the city. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily to make judgment calls on behalf of other people's lives. Sure. or to step into their shoes. I will just say that personally, as long as you don't put the city at risk, what you do in your time is your business. But I have to protect the city. That's why I'm here.
Sure.
So I welcome certain feedback. I don't hold any judgment for if an employee wants to come up to my office and provide that feedback. If they feel less comfortable going to HR for that feedback, I will take it. However, again, the number one priority is the city, and to minimize risk to the city.
Yes, we share the same thought and opinion, and I would agree. I don't have any judgment either. So my last follow-up question, just to clarify the testing, I'm just applying the 5W rule. So we have 5 years, according to Alderman Fleming's request. And I think for you, this should be easily tracked. So it's like whenever we have an expense that we go back 5 years, it was paid to a institution that checks drugs, we want to be able to pull the data. So I would like to know who, by position, the when are they tested, how often, as well as how much does it cost over the last 5 years. Because if this is something that is, I have no idea how much we spend on drug testing. So I'm very curious to know, and I think by understanding that gives us some indication of, is this going to be a brand new expense or not, is just the other thing. But the who is very, I'm curious about that, and I want you to drill down as deep as you can with that question without giving the individual's name. Alderman Fisk. You all right?
No, I was getting a little worried there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to be really careful that we don't put forth anyone's identity or name. I mean, this is just, the general information of.
Yeah, we know when it's
How
a
many-
truck driver, we know if it's a policeman, we know if it's a fireman. That doesn't give any name. We'd like to know if it's admin or if it's someone, that's all.
I'm going to say we should leave that with the law department to tell us what is appropriate and what isn't in terms of employee confidentiality.
Well, beyond employee confidentiality, these are medical issues, so they would be subject to HIPAA as well. So that's why I was asking very clearly if you just wanted numbers, and you also said you also want a position. So
Classifications, like I don't need to know it's a Secretary 3 that's in the health department. That would be too much. But I think we know when it's a truck driver, they go to get tested. That's common knowledge. So I would assume there's a statistics that says X amount of people in public works are tested. If you want to keep it as simple as departments, then that's fine.
I will take the referral and do my best to
Thank
try
you.
and get you the information that you seek while maintaining not only the privacy but also the legality.
This guy, he's good. He's going to be.
All right, so let me complicate it more, and I understand what you're saying, Alderman Frisk, and I'm pretty sure we had
You're
this
gonna try to,
discussion
I'm telling you.
in executive session. I think that I asked for similar numbers, and HR brought them to executive session, which is an appropriate place. And again, not with names and all, but
Right.
which is an appropriate place maybe that we finish this conversation, and then obviously when the policy comes forward, we can come back here. But I do think us paying attention to some of these numbers is important. So if it means we have to take it in executive session, which we have the ability to do in this committee, then we can do that. We do it with police records as well. Again, with keeping it high level enough that it's not personal, but maybe more than we can talk about on this dais.
Thank you.
Because my other question for that, because I didn't realize this until you said it, so thank you, was promotions. So I would be interested in just, maybe you can even email me that portion of the employee manual that talks about when you have a promotion that you
Or
have
transfers, is that the same
I
thing?
don't know.
You
Did you
said
say transfer or
transfers.
promotion? What did you say?
It's phrased as transfers in the handbook, so it could be promotions.
All
but
right.
it
Well, whatever
specifically
we
says
whatever we
transfers.
quantify there, I would also be interested to, because is it everyone? Is it some people? I'm curious.
I believe it's defined as if you apply for a different position, you're going to get tested.
All right.
Good to know. How many pages is that handbook, Nicola? 82? Can you kind of highlight the areas based on this conversation and just forward it on to members of the committee? It's a real conversation.
I believe it's in section 4.
Thank you. See?
I have read the handbook and I have
Okay.
offered my opinion.
So
It was not taken.
unless there's, okay, please send it to me so I can study, be a quick study. It's been interesting, this whole topic. We've been having really in-depth technical conversations all over towns in various wards from people who are interested from a business perspective, people that are interested from medical. So now we're looking at our staff. So that's the reason for the detailed question. So thank
Absolutely.
you very much for taking this on. And we look forward to hearing back from you next month and keeping us in the loop as this conversation progresses.
For sure.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, Alderman Fisk?
Mr. Cummings, just one more question. Is this an appropriate conversation for executive session?
It not really.
Okay.
And to be fair, any discussion regarding the numbers probably is best suited for executive session.
Okay.
And I question the propriety of the handbook itself being a subject of public scrutiny, because it only really applies to the employees of the city. But I'm certainly
Interesting.
willing to discuss it publicly if that's the will of the council.
Okay, so at what point is it appropriate to take this to executive session as opposed to open session?
Once I actually have the statistics that the committee is looking for is probably best.
Okay. Well, yeah, but I think we've got to weigh it all in context, I think.
Yeah. Direction, and
Yeah.
I trust with
Yeah.
the.
No, I just needed some clarity about
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. important topics that we discussed in the evening. Is that it? Seeing no lights, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much, and thank you to staff.